I'd like to welcome everyone to session 4 of the Peel Table Education Series. Tonight we have Chris Delaney and Ardavan Eizadirad with us, both from the Toronto board. Their topic tonight that they've chosen is going to be game control with cause and effect. Just a little bit about Mr. Delaney, our key speaker tonight. Chris started his officiating career in Peel, officiated there for a number of years and then moved on to Toronto to continue his officiating career there. Has attended OFSA in the past, as well as a number of OCAA and CCAA tournaments. Was added to the U Sport panel in 2008, attended a CIS U Sport tournament in 2016, and currently works at that level as well as the NBL level and CEBL level as well. Boys, thank you for taking some time out to chat with everyone tonight. I appreciate having you on the call. Again, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you have questions, please make sure they go into the chat. If you'd like to save your question to ask at the end, you can use the hand up function as well. Throughout the evening in the chat, there's going to be some information shared about upcoming sessions, so people have that information, as well as a link that you can use to access the previous calls from the sessions. Thank you again to Peter McDonald from Table for fixing those all up and getting them posted in there. So I'll post the link so you guys have access to those. You can use those for yourself, or you can use those as well for your boards and different things like that if you wish to share that stuff with members. So without further ado, Chris, stage is yours.
Thanks, Daniel. Welcome everybody and happy St. Patrick's Day to you all. Appreciate Ardavan participating on this with me, and shout out to you, Dan and Peter, for organizing these sessions, and it's a compliment to be part of it. So appreciate you asking us to speak tonight. As Daniel said, we want to talk a little bit about game control and some of the areas that can cause the game to be out of control and what those effects look like. And we're going to try to have a little interactive dialogue. We look forward to some Q&A at the end of it. So by all means, use the tools provided to comment, question. And I think it's also important to note before we get too far down the path, there's really no wrong or right here. When some of these games get so far south and so out of control, you really got to do what you can best to survive, best to get it back in play, use the tools provided, use common sense. So what we talk about today are really just suggestions, ideas, with the intent to help everybody just think a little bit clearer pre-game, during the game, post-game, get a little bit better, and we all look forward to being a better official when we get back to being on the court. I'm going to turn my camera off so I don't run into any Wi-Fi issues, and then we'll start this presentation. Starting with a clip. So I'd say this is one of the things we're probably trying to avoid in a game situation, having a coach get so wound up in reaction to some of our whistles and earn himself an early ejection. If you heard the commentator, that's a first half ejection. I don't know how many of those happen. It's usually second half when the intensity increases, but it gives us a good indication that anything can happen at any time of the game. Adding a little humor to it, I'd be curious to see whose shoulder was sore the next day. Coach for throwing a jacket on the ground, and I think that's Chris Spooney coming across the court, tossing the coach, throwing his shoulder out.
It's Jason Steele, but thanks, Chrissy.
Okay, Jay Steele. Your shoulder okay for golf season?
I was on the game with Jay though there.
Okay, so bringing Ardavan into it. So Ardavan, in some of your experience, whether you're a crew chief or you're on a crew, what are some of the things that you heard language-wise used in a pregame that you could attribute to trying to get a crew ready to control, manage a game?
Yeah, I mean, I think based on my experiences, you want to avoid subjective language like "let's let the players play" or "this is a girls' game," and shift towards using FIBA language and talk about legal versus illegal contact. The whole point of the pregame is to get on the same page. Sometimes you work with people you have rapport with or worked in the past, and sometimes it's brand new, never worked with them. So you want to establish the parameters. So be specific instead of saying let's trust each other. Talk about where you're gonna divide the line for 3-point coverage. How you're gonna cover a ABC play that's going away and it requires coverage from everybody. So the more specific you are, I think better, and it'll help the crew start off being prepared.
That's great, Ardavan. Language is important. Obviously, we want to be on the same language. It is up for interpretation. So how does FIBA define game control? A referee said to be in control of a game when the game's operating smoothly under the rules intended, as well as the rules of sportsmanship being rigidly but fairly enforced. This is different than game management.
And you want to be in charge with a service attitude, and that's important, and that's the terminology FIBA is really pushing.
So this hit home for me, and I think we really do speak a lot around some of the words in here when we talk about judging speed and managing athleticism, quickness, rhythm. We talk about letting teams defend fairly. We want teams to be able to run their offensive sequences without illegal interference. So we try to use the certain words that wrap around this definition, but it's good to understand the true definition of the term. But I actually did some further reading, and FIBA goes a little bit deeper into game control, which I personally had to take away, and we'll be looking to implement this as I go forward. The FIBA book carried on with language said, ultimately, it is the referees that are in charge of the game. They define what's allowed and what is not, and nobody else. And what I really took from that is saying, each one of us individually and collectively, when we get on that floor, the decisions we make are telling the players what we're going to let them do and not let them do. And we can either set them up for success for the rest of the game, or we can actually set them up into failure. So Ardavan, from your opinion, what would you say you've seen at any level that can attribute to games getting out of control or going south?
I mean, I think it starts with kind of lack of focus, especially in crunch time or pressure situations. Also, guessing, that gets us in trouble big time, right? Guessing or phantom calls or anticipating. And sometimes, the lack of inconsistency from overcalling, undercalling. A big one would be bang, bang plays with bodies on the floor and we have no call. Those increase the temperature of the game, and we have to be ready.
Good stuff. I wouldn't disagree. It goes into preparation. Is the crew prepared? Are we knowledgeable of what can happen between the teams, the players, the coaches? And that can lead to call accuracy. Being consistent is a word we use quite often, but when the teams have a quite different look in the first half versus second, their substitutes change the game. They can go from a zone defense to man. If we're prepared, then we can actually improve our accuracy and be consistent. But if the game changes, we have to definitely be aware of those changes, the temperature, the game conditions, competitive matchups change as they go ahead and get into substitute, and all that stuff can really help us control that game. Or if we're not on top of that, we may lose control of the game relatively early. One of the things that I've done over the last couple of years that I felt became important, because a lot of the leagues we ref in, they're really coaches leagues. And what I was asking and sharing with the officials that I worked with were my past experiences with the players in the game, coaches in the game. It's really nice to know, and vice versa between the other referees, it's nice to know if somebody was on a game with the same team a week ago, a day ago, and there was situations between the two of them. That way we're not getting caught off guard. We're really keeping our eyes open, and we can protect one another, because sometimes history repeats itself. The coaches, the players can bring things over to the next game, and as a crew, we got to be ready for that. It goes into trust. We want to build it, we want to keep it, and we want to gain it throughout the game between one another. Other causes, if we don't communicate with coaches or we pretend to ignore it, hoping it goes away, it's actually in reverse. The hostility can actually increase it by ignoring it. So dealing with it can definitely be a situation of control. what do we look like? Are we ready to referee? Is our body language interested and attentive to the game? I always think there's increased intensity in certain plays of the game, whether it's end of shot clock, whether it's end of a period. There's just that little extra intensity in those plays. And if we don't get those plays right, we ourselves are setting ourselves up for the next play, whether it's the next period or the next play, for instant pushback, retaliation, et cetera. And it's nice to be a little bit sharper on those little plays that have that extra intensity. And then, of course, we've all been in gyms and games where the table's just not ready to referee, and they're part of the crew, they're part of the game. But we run into erroneous horns, we run into the clock running, the clock not running, shot clock errors, foul count incorrect. And that can actually go into the confidence level of the players and the coaches in the overall game, and we should be aware of that.
Yeah, and then as an extension of that, an unpopular call, even if correct, should not lead to loss of control. But that means you have to know your stuff. You have to know your rules. You have to be up to date with interpretation and rule changes from year to year, and continuously investing on that to be on top of it when you make those tough calls. And anyone can referee a game in control, in a controlled environment, but not everyone can thrive and officiate a game that is out of control or perform under pressure from coaches to players to fans. And so you have to constantly work on that. And in the rest of the presentation, we'll talk about some of these tips that can help that for focus. And when sometimes focus is lost, how to refocus.
Early in my career, I got a great chance to work with one of the best referees in Canada, great career, Olympic official. And he said to me at the first intermission, and this goes to game awareness and preparedness, he said to me, "Chris, I give my crew the first quarter to show me they've got themselves ready to referee and that the decisions are being accepted by all parts of the game. If so, I know I can go and do my job with ease. If not, I know what kind of adjustment I need to make." And that always kind of resonated with me, with giving our referees a chance to shine, the chance to build the trust and to gain acceptance. Going to go to another clip. I look at a play like this and I think, we've been around so many different leagues and rec leagues and men's leagues and high school, and we do come across temperamental players, and it's not our fault. They're there not to play basketball. They're there to cause trouble. And those particular players, when we know about them, we can call them out and prepare for it. But then the other side of me thinks, what were the things that went on during this game to force a player like that to intentionally foul first, react negatively to earn himself a technical foul, and then purposely fire a ball at the referee, which could cause any normal penalties, whether it's expulsion from the league, suspension, fines, etc. And you just ask yourself, is it the player because it's not always our fault, or is this just something that we could have got ahead of earlier in the game when we see that temperature rising in that particular player? In your games, Ardavan, what have you seen compared to this video? When games start to go south, what are some other things you've seen happen that get the referee's attention? And do you ever pull any instant learning from those situations to react positively?
I think for me, the list of events, of course, the top ones are going to be fights, ejections from two technicals, or dirty plays. Those are the ones, if we don't miss it, really escalates the temperature of the game and things can turn around quick, especially off-ball coverage. Constant commentary not being addressed, and calls not being accepted as the game escalates due to inconsistency and being out of position. For me, what has helped me learn, we're all going to have those games, some more than others, but never take it personal. It can emotionally take a toll on you when you have a bad game. As you try to process it, think about what could you have controlled. Looking at those factors, put your energy into things you could have controlled, and see what you could have done differently to get a different outcome from preventative officiating. Accept tension is part of game, and we have to learn to process and cultivate it. So how do we respond to tension? Why were we aroused in certain situation compared to others? And are you prepared for the unlikely to happen? Like we know fights don't happen often or these situations, but are we prepared from the pregame, from the timeout discussions, halftime discussion? What kind of adjustments are we making, and what roles do we assign in a crew of 2 or 3 in order to be prepared when that situation arises, so we are able to kind of be preventative and avoid it from even further escalating?
Appreciate those short answers, Ardavan. Thanks. Some other things that can be affected through our actions and player behaviors. Constant arguing, constant pushback, not accepting of any calls. We take that information from coaches, players, and referees in whole or in part decide to start changing the way they're making decisions to try to appease coaches. The crew chemistry goes south. We have stretch calls, we have guest calls, phantom calls, out of position calls, trust factors are lost. We had a game plan, it went away. We lost complete control of the bench decorum. I'm sure we've all been on games, you're going up the sideline, and not only is the coach standing there gesturing, so is the assistant, so are the players, right down to the equipment manager, giving you grief for a call that you thought was okay. We just lose complete respect from the bench. And then you get into what we saw in that video, complete inappropriate behavior. Comes with warnings, texts, and sportings, disqualifying fouls, etc. And then the rough play and the fighting that we really want to avoid. That story of, I'm not having a game on my fight. I'm not going to have a fight on my game, really comes to fruition when we referee some of the games that we're part of. And of course, our own credibility. You know, we think, I'm on the game, the other 2 referees, they're not having a good day, I'm fine, they're not. That's not true. It's a crew that walks out of that gym with their head held high and with the credibility from the coaches and players, and we have to believe that. And then some of the leagues we work in, some of the assignments we get, some of the assigners, the supervisors we work for, you know, games that you lose control, have a fight, toss coaches, etc., that can actually impact our future assignments. And a lot of us are working this game, the sport of officiating, because we want to work the best game we can possibly be on. And then again, as I read through some of the FIBA stuff, I thought this was quite interesting because it resonates with me. Guys that have refereed with me, I often ask this in the car ride on the way home. Were there situations, were there plays, were there areas of the game that, and I quote, could create a situation whereby the team that deserved to win the game may not? And I think when we get in that car, we get in the change room after games, we say to ourselves, okay, you know, there definitely was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 calls that we coulda, shoulda, woulda, whether it's collectively or individual, and we take those away and we watch game tape. We try to get better. We learn from that experience. But if we can look each other eye and say, you know what, regardless of the calls that we coulda, shoulda, woulda, based on the way the teams played, if the right team won, then I think we need to help hold our head up high. I'd encourage you to go into the FIBA book and look at some of this stuff. It's well written, it's well worded, and it's the building blocks, the pillars of our game from a fishing standpoint. The word consistency, again, we talk it, do we know it? Are we prepared? Are we ready for it? Ardavan mentioned earlier, dead ball officiating. This is a great opportunity for us to not only officiate players, but actually take the chance to interact and engage ourselves with a couple of players that maybe they're roughhousing. Time to explain a call to a coach that he had a question. Take that time to referee not only the players, but situations and get a better feel, a better sense of the game, and build some collaboration, build some cooperation from the players, coaches. Be willing to make that game saver. You know, if it's right and it's good for the game, we need to be willing to make that game saver. What's your image? Are we dressed appropriately? Are we standing tall, or do we look like we can keep up to the play? Are our mechanics proper and accepted? Ardavan also mentioned preventive officiating. What can we do when we see situations arising and get ahead of it? And really, there's no place, if you're an ex-player and now you're referee, coaches, fans, players, they all know it. There's no real place in our game for phantom calls. We need to make sure we're not guessing at plays, see the play, call the play. And of course, marginal contact, that can also get into our minds a bit when we call something that's not required. we're trying to react to another referee that made a call, or we're trying to make up for our own call. It just really stirs the pot a bit on our own. And it's a good topic to talk about when we are getting ready for games. I'm gonna go to another video. So while I do apologize for the quality of the video, that's actually Dave Smart at U of T yelling right across one of my partners at me. I probably kicked another call that he didn't like. And there he is stomping, yelling. And I'll ask you, Ardavan, as you observed this video a few times, what do you take from this video?
Well, I mean, I think it shows that this could have been a situation that could have escalated, but through team officiating, the ref closest to the incident being a center during free throw, gave the coach a moment to express their dislike for the call. And when that further escalated, staying calm with their body language, using their hand, said that's enough, and it allowed the coach to cool down and move on. And that was important, because if it was not addressed, as you said, Chris, maybe he'll continue yelling across the court trying to get your attention. But he just wanted to be heard and let his displeasure known, and was ready to move on to the next play.
And we talk about this all the time, right? We're not going to have a coach yell across the floor at the other official, wrong or right, and you're standing there, deal with it. And many times we don't deal with it. This was extremely well handled, calm, assertive. Coach heard it, accepted it, and we avoided a technical foul. The situation could have easily been reversed when it was not dealt with. Smart would not probably stop until he's acknowledged, and here somebody would come across the floor and tech him up, and that potentially could be our fault, giving him that technical foul when it was. This video shows how easily it was dealt with. So good video to keep in mind. Some of the things that we just think are additional to those FIBA principles, those FIBA pillars. So I'm sorry, sticky fingers. When things do start to go south and we lose control, the first intermission, the first opportunity, I like to talk about getting back to basics. Steve Foxcroft might be on the call. He texted me earlier. He's been saying it for 25 years, as long as I referee. Call the obvious, not the obscure. We've all heard it. Let's go identify those issues. Let's go deal with those issues right now before it gets any worse. Let's put ourselves on a high alert, especially in a physical play. Sometimes it's a great idea for the next 2-3 minutes, call everything. It really sends a message to the players that we're not putting up with anything any longer. I can remember being on a game with a couple of tenured officials. We let it get too physical for a number of periods, and we finally just got together and said, you know what, that's it. Anything that happens next is going to be escalated, whether it's unsporting, disqualifying, and we needed to have that call because we didn't have good call selection. We tried to let them play, and it didn't work out for us. Our voice and communication is the best we can do. If we communicate with coaches what we see, what we understand, we stay consistent, it can continually build the trust that we're working hard for them. I can recall a game, it was the first period, it was a few years back, it was the first period of the game, and I would say not one whistle from all three of the referees were correct. And we had the entire place, fans included, up in arms. I think the scorekeeper was even waving his arms at us. And it's not something that's written down, and it's not for everybody, not for everybody, but we got the two coaches together between intermissions, and we just said, listen, as a crew, we're not very good right now, and we're going to work hard to get better and prove it to you, but you're going to have to let us get better. And the constant bickering, yelling, gesturing from players, coaches isn't allowing us to get better. And you know what? We got out of that game. I think the game improved dramatically from both the teams and ourselves. And it's just an opportunity to communicate with coaches and ask them for some support. Ardavan would know this better than everybody. Not everybody is adaptable to the FIBA language or the rule book language. And sometimes we just need to know our audience and speak to them with the proper language so it resonates with them.
Yeah, and just to give you some examples, I mean, as Chris said, the language is important. I would say over time, using basketball language is the best way to go. But that means sometimes you might have to paraphrase it in ways that your audience or the level understands it, right? Versus little kids versus OUA or different leagues. Give you an example, early on in my OUA career, in a university game. I mean, if you know me, you probably heard the story, but, in the 30-point game, there was a confusion about a call and the coach was being very reactive about it. And I used the language as like, we're trying to help and solve the matter. Don't be extra. And the next day I had a complaint saying I was sexist. And so I had to deal with it, deconstruct the word, write a long letter to the OUA about it. But it shows to tell you language is important and it can be interpreted in different ways. So using FIBA language is definitely the way to go. And two other quick points. Body language is important. I think examine how do you look like when you run, when you report. That's important. I have a relaxed personality. I'm always calm in pressure situations, but my body language can be misinterpreted for not caring or not being engaged. So I intentionally work on that in the last couple of years. And how do you use explanations to diffuse situations? And a good one would be when we think about continuation plays, maybe a player is really coming to you and say, how can that be a continuation? And, a good line I have is, you know what, you might not like it, but I can guarantee if you do the same thing, you're going to get a continuation on the other end. And usually that really diffuses the situation because we're talking about being consistent.
Captain goes off the floor, we can appoint someone else. But we've all been in games where the captain's probably the last player you want to engage in a support mechanism. So how do we identify that player or coach, assistant coach to help us champion a resolve? We need to have the willingness to adjust and acknowledge the game may have gotten away and it's gone past us. Can we make that adjustment on the fly? And can we acknowledge that that's what's required? Keeping focused. Sometimes it's rabbit ears. Sometimes it's just overcautious officiating. I think we define who's fueling the fire. Sometimes the coaches are winding the players up, and then vice versa. Sometimes the players wind the coaches up. And where do we insert ourselves to get to the source? Like I said earlier, it's not a bad idea to bring captains, players, coaches together where it fits, if it makes sense, if we can get away with it. To just ask for their cooperation, because the games start to end up being too rough. Lots of technical fouls equals lots of paperwork equals lots of fines depending on the league, and that's something that we could probably get ahead of. And use the tools. We were able to warn, and we should be using those tools to keep the control of the game. Gonna go to another clip.
Squad with this level of physicality that they have, an advantage that they have over a lot of teams when they impose their will. This is how it's going to look from time to time.
And Clayton hit the deck hard underneath the pressure from Aussie, and then Allman put the long shot up. That was no good. And then Aussie right back the other way. Now he and Clayton come together, and this could get ugly.
Let's back at him too.
Let's hope that cooler heads prevail here. That was a dangerous looking play. I just think it was some aggressive defense by Aussie trying to track it down from behind. And he and Clayton, though, at the other end of the floor had come together, and Aussie had run into Clayton. Clayton went down to the deck when Allman put that long shot up, and then in transition, Marquise Clayton, as he's known to do, went coast to coast with, trying to drive the lane. Aussie aggressive from behind, and then, the chairs in behind are very close to the baseline, and it was just a pile of players in behind it. And you know what? A good job by the referees, but even more so the players policing themselves there and not letting it get out of hand. And I think now we've had somebody teed up.
Yeah, I think they gave him a chance. Calm it down, calm it down, calm it down. I like a refereeing squad that uses the technical.
So obviously this is a worst case scenario when we get into situations with extreme rough play. We've got unsporting fouls there and technical fouls there. The referees recover nicely. They deal with the situation nicely. But if we go back to the beginning of the clip and what really led to this altercation, there's a contact contact foul up high, and we've all been there where we're giving the losing team, it's the fourth period, 26-point difference. We're giving the losing team the benefit of the doubt. We're not penalizing illegal play. We've all done it. And there we go down the other end in a fast break. And the player that actually was fouled on white takes offense to it and takes it into his own hands to punish one of the players in the orange. And we get that hard foul and we get this mess. And we're probably late in the fourth period here. And now we're walking off the floor into the change room, feeling like we probably did a great job in this league, it's 12-minute period. So what, 12, 24, 36, 44, 45 minutes out of 48, we did a great job. And then these players had to overreact, whatever the history is. And it's just a scenario that we want to avoid at all costs. And it goes back to that point I made earlier that was one of my takeaways. And I'll read it again. Ultimately, it is the referees that are in charge of the game. They define what is allowed and what is not. And I think that ties that point together pretty well from the start to this slide or that video. Ardavan started on the path of just self-evaluating. We need to take these experiences and walk away with them, continue to be in charge with that service attitude. Did we use technical fouls appropriately? Did we use warnings appropriately? I think we've all been in the change room at the end of the game and say, yeah, I think I could have teched up coach or teched up number 24, whatever it is. And I think if we're sitting there saying I could have, then I think it's obvious that we should have. And then what do we do from a call selection? Were we on the same page as a team? Did we have that willingness, that discipline to hold the whistle, pass on a call? And then were we also equally willingness to make that difficult call, even like Ardavan mentioned earlier, even if it is unpopular, but it's right? And one of the oldest supervisors here in Ontario, I remember him coming in the change room after every game, and he always had a bit of a joke to him, a little snide comment to one of the crew guys. We'd have a little bit of a laugh, and then he'd say, okay, what was the score at half? What were the foul count? How many timeouts were left? Just kind of challenge us on our game awareness. We talk about some calls, and then he'd say, every game he'd ask the same question. Do you guys think you could have called more? And I'd say 9 times out of 10, we responded with positive. Yeah, we could have called more, keeping that game under control. Were we ready to referee? Strong whistle, good body language. Did we apply appropriate rules and interpretations to the game? And then I'll let Ardavan, this is really unique to me because I think a lot of us, when Ardavan explains it, I think a lot of us do this without even acknowledging or know that we do it. Under the topic of emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and I think the emotional intelligence is so big to help us get better, especially in pressure situations. And it's not just unique to officiating, it's really a life skill. So really starting with knowing what are your own strengths, from communication to body language to how you deal and respond to situations, but also knowing your triggers. Maybe when certain people speak to you a certain way, it rubs you the wrong way. That's rooted in your life experiences, and you're quick to tee them up. Maybe instead, if you were a little bit more patient or used different words, it could have diffused the situation. And as you get more experience in pressure situations, you get better at this. And this is why you have to self-evaluate those games that have gone south and ask yourself, what could you have controlled? And our reactions is one thing we can control. And that's important. Even think about how you give out a technical. Is it very dramatic or is it calm and cool? And in different situations, it's going to require different things, which takes us to the next point, rituals. From sports psychology, this is super important. When we do something wrong or we think we missed a call, what happens is naturally we're going to replay it in our head. Was I in the right place? Did I receive the play? Was I reactionary? So what's important is have a ritual to flush your mistake. What I mean by that is you park it till later, which allows you to focus in the moment. So for me, it's literally a visualization of flushing the toilet in a game. If I feel like I missed something, I park it. I may even put it in my head, you know what? It's 3:54 in the quarter. I want to make sure I watch that game tape or that sequence later on. But by parking, it allows me to refocus. And now let's say I go into halftime and we can deconstruct and talk about that play. Some other strategies to refocus, especially in pressure situations, self-talk. talking to yourself, whether it's in your head or through your whistle, where's my competitive matchup? What am I watching? This will help you not ball watch and actually focus. And imagery, right? Like you think about as players, we teach them, hey, visualize the free throw going in when they have to make a big free throw. So it's the same thing as officials, right? Visualize you doing well and a positive self-talk, and combining these will help. And then to the last point, always remember the table crew is part of the team. So when you do have situations where players have come on the floor and maybe a fight has broken out and the crew did not maybe miss something, it's okay to take your time. Ask the people at the table, hey, who came off? What did you see? That's important information. You then sift through that information as a collective crew and decide what's important for the game. Always keep in mind, safety is the #1 thing, and keeping the game in control.
I think I saw Dave Maxon's name on the call, and I can go back many years ago when we worked some tough games together. And I can remember when he was so competitive with himself that under that, emotional intelligence, he would have a call, whether the coach didn't like it or he didn't like it, you could actually see it in his facial gesturing. He'd drop his head, he'd be thinking about it. And I can remember saying to him, you know what, Dave, fuck it. You have to let that go. We need you on the game. Then we got to get the next call right and not miss the next call. And I think it was a good learning experience for the both of us on knowing your crew, knowing what our strengths and weaknesses are, and trying just to support them, bring them along, because we truly do in these tough games. We need one another. You can't do it alone. Last clip. Definitely a messy play. Ardavan, what's this clip tell you about the game?
I mean, I think it shows the importance of sportsmanship and respect for the game and safety. The game is bigger than any of us, whether as players, coaches, and officials. And here you could see that they're helping each other, make sure the player doesn't land in an awkward position to get hurt. And that speaks to the bigger picture than the specific play.
Yeah, it's best in the East, best in the West, all the best players out there. You see Kyrie Irving coming over and helping Klay Thompson from going to the ground, et cetera. And it is a real good sign of great sportsmanship. But to me, this would put me on a bit of alert, knowing the intensity of the game, knowing the importance of the game. This is a playoff game. And this might be kosher and acceptable in the first period, but are we aware that this could continue? It's not always going to be sportsmanship. So I put that in the back of my head and I say, okay, I remember that play. The guys dealt with each other calmly, nicely, show good sportsmanship, but is it going to continue? And I just keep that in the back of my head as a trigger mechanism to see if the game starts to grow and become more intense as we get through the plays, to ensure that that doesn't go unnoticed or ignored down the road. In general, we also have to accept, we also have to accept the fact that, some of these games never come back under control. And if so, what do we dictate and determine the end of the game procedure looks like?
I think with experience, you will get better at the learning, examining, and continuing to add to your toolbox of tips and strategies to grow and improve.
Talk live about some of the refereeing situations that go on in this leagues.
And watch game tape if available, or sometimes you don't watch the whole tape. Pick specific plays that if you evaluate it, it's going to make you better. So be purposeful with what you watch and how you deconstruct it.
All of our positive and negative experiences, we need to learn from those and build our skill set.
And a smart referee doesn't only learn from their own mistakes, but a wise referee learns from others' mistakes and others' clips and others' game tapes.
Participate in group chats. Referee forums are available like this one.
And be humble about it. We all make mistakes, so don't take it personal, and have a hungry attitude of always wanting to improve, which is really why we call it growth mindset.
And come back better next time. As I said, I prefer to have clips of myself, but I couldn't find any. So I do appreciate these gentlemen who's helped me pull some videos. So thank you, Jay Steele, David Maxon, Peter McDonald, Marty Nadeau. Dan, now if you want to open up if there's any questions or comments or.
Awesome. Thank you guys for the information. There's quite a bit to take in there, which is awesome. Definitely give members a lot to think about. I had one question come in through the chat. The question is as follows. It says, as a female official, I'm constantly being told to work on my voice when speaking with coaches. What would you suggest to do to help better project my voice? I find I'm not taken seriously in certain situations due to my size and my voice. Even when I get inside as the crew chief for games, sometimes the coaches will dismiss me completely and direct their attention to my male partners. What can I do to improve on this during games?
Good question. And I would be one that would have some similar situations there. My voice does not carry in a gym. It's not very loud. I can't talk over people. The way you can, I guess, start to improve it is your presence, your core presence, your strength to whistle, your strength to mechanic. Get closer to the table. If we try to yell across the floor and that can't be heard. And then over time, if you have strong judgment, good decision making, deal with coaches professionally, properly, they will definitely start to adhere to you and give you a lot more respect.
I think I'll jump on that. Is just while you work on your voice, also be who you are and know what is your strength, right? Like I can be a Delaney and I have my own unique personality. So you have to figure out what works for you while working on some things that are identified. So you can compensate for voice, maybe how you blow your whistle, your body language, as Chris has mentioned, your mechanics, and being right on calls. Even if they question you and they constantly see that you're right, you build rapport and relationships, and that's important.
Perfect. Another question just came through. What's the best advice that you can give to an official during a timeout that might have just had a tough call go the wrong way?
That's not Marty Nadeau, is it?
No.
Well, I think we just talked about that as far as the emotional intelligence. You know, we can't take that call back. We have to live with it. The game's gonna have to live with it. The important thing is not to make another one. The makeup call, everyone in the gym knows what it is. You just have to put it behind you, hold your head high, and be better next time.
And for me, I would say, ask yourself, do you need to discuss the call? Sometimes if somebody knows they missed the call, you don't really need to add insult to injury. They know they missed it, right? So if someone doesn't know they missed the call, I think it's important to have that honest conversation. So I think the context is important. So I'll leave it at that. Flush the mistake.
Yeah, and Chris, you brought up a good point during the presentation. And I mean, the years that I've worked high-level basketball and stuff like that is you don't want to dwell on it, but you want to make sure that you get your partner back in the game. And I think that's important, because if they continue to struggle from that point, you know, it can get really tough, and it just seems like the little snowball turns into a huge boulder at that point, and it really starts to go downhill. But I both you guys are right on the nose with that. You know, you want to get your partner back into the game as quickly as possible, and those calls are going to happen. It's happened to everyone. It will continue to happen. You know, it's the way that you bounce back from it. I think that you keep going in the game. But does anyone else have any questions? If you do, don't worry about typing in the chat. If you just use your hand up function, I can unmute you, and we'll go about it that way to save you some typing. And I like, Tony, I like your comment. I just saw it in the chat here now. He said, Peter McDonald once said to me, my third game ever, and he said, I'll never forget this: when the temperature of the gym goes up, the temperature of the referee should go down. If that happens, you'll be amazed at the focus. if there's no further questions, gents, thank you very much for your presentation. We really enjoyed having you guys out to talk.